of women and children, torture, gross medical neglect, disastrous mental health damage, self-harm and suicide attempts, both Manus and Nauru remain operational, with the costs of these centres over the last 4 years running at about $5 billion. And still they sit there. This government that rejects the responsibility for helping to create these refugees in the first place instead prefers to demonise them with constant cries of illegals, country shoppers, economic refugees, and now of course we have a new name, fake refugees. This has of course been ramped up now to include a whipped up frenzy of fearing all Muslims as either terrorists or they're here coming to take over the country. Australia is descending into a terrifying place for anyone who cares about human rights, or, as we are now called, lefty do-gooder social justice warriors. Remember that these things always start with politicians dividing the people, us and them. It starts with intolerance and hate, and when people stop caring and turn a blind eye to the injustices that are going on around them because they think it doesn't affect them, it is happening to someone else. It started with boat people, and now we are living in a time where we have a One Nation senator who calls Muslims mosquitoes. Pauline Hanson says we need to inoculate ourselves against Islam. If a person dares to speak out, the media and members of the government feel there is no problem to call on them to be deported, or as we heard disgustingly last week, to be run over. All of these conditions are in play. But most of all, we know that if there were 2,000 blue-eyed, blonde, white-skinned Christians who had arrived by boat, they would not have spent the last 4 years in offshore concentration camps run by Australia. We now have Peter Dutton, who does not want to be held accountable to anybody, in particular judges and tribunals, as the new Home Affairs Minister. The new Home Affairs Department will incorporate immigration, border protection, domestic security agencies, ASIO and the Australian Federal Police, and they will all answer to Dutton. He has basically placed an information blackout over immigration detention and solidified the profoundly anti-democratic Border Force Act and repeatedly lied to the public about offshore detention, from stories that refugee advocates were encouraging certain behaviours, implying that the self-immolations are the fault of advocates. There are no children in detention. There are 169 children on Nauru. And trying to blame the Good Friday siege, where the PNG Navy shot indiscriminately into the compound, on the Manus men themselves. Dutton, Turnbull and the Liberal Party have proved by their appalling, cold-hearted behaviour in regards to Manus and Nauru that if you tell a big enough lie, a lie so far out of the experience of ordinary people that they cannot comprehend it, that if you tell them that you are doing nothing more than keeping them safe, if you tell them that desperate times require desperate measures, and if you do your utmost to conceal from them the unpleasant reality of what you are actually doing, then eventually you'll find you can get away with absolutely anything. And now it is not just those who arrived by boat years after. For years, we have had men, women and children patiently waiting to go through proper process to be assessed as refugees and find permanent safety in Australia. Dutton sent out letters demanding people complete complex asylum claims in just weeks. With legal aid services pushed to the limit, people will be forced to go without legal advice or interpreters. And he wants 7,500 people rushed through a process designed to fail by the 1st of October. It is an impossible demand that will mean people are wrongly assessed, at which point Dutton has said he'll deport them. Andy Butler said in Overland, the sort of Australia that the Coalition appears to desire is one where migrant or culturally and linguistically diverse communities do not belong, where migrants and from non-Anglo countries aren't given the opportunity to lay down roots and build a life for themselves and the generations that will come after them, even though some of these communities have been moving here at least as long as British colonisation, Muslims included. And under Peter Dutton's recently proposed citizenship changes, permanent residents will be forced to wait for 4 years before they apply for citizenship, as well as sit an English language test and demonstrate their familiarity with Australia's national values. Worryingly, it will be the Coalition who determine what these so-called Australian values are, and it up to Dutton himself to determine if applicants have sufficiently integrated into this image of Australia. He will have the singular power to veto applications. This from the man who has been happy to preside over the human rights violations and torture of vulnerable people on Manus and Nauru. On the 29th of June, the United Nations released a scathing report on Manus and Nauru, calling on the Australian government to evacuate every man, woman and child currently warehoused and bring them to safety in Australia. And still they sit there. That very same day, the UN released another damning report stating that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are denied basic human rights with unequal access to proper housing, social security and health services. Our government obviously has been watching complacency and apathy, which the majority of the people of Australia have demonstrated by tolerating and ignoring the disgraceful situations occurring on offshore detention, because bad things are happening while good people have stayed silent. A member of the whistleblowers activists said, "I cannot be silent while the government actively tortures people and denies people the realisation of their human rights. The realisation of the rights of people seeking asylum represent all of our rights, rights that we share in theory, but that are not being realised in practice. We are living in a system that produces propaganda that gives the illusion of a democracy. However, behind the facade, we are living in an increasingly militarised state whereby we face the gradual erosion of the freedoms and rights that we are enslaved to. The power of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the power of ideas to change the world. It inspires us to continue working to ensure that all people can gain freedom, equality and dignity. And one vital aspect of this task is to empower people to demand what should be guaranteed, their human rights. So please, continue to fight strong, speak up, and please, please don't stop until they are all brought to safety here."